Hello everyone and welcome back to Tech with NK. In today's video, I'm going to propose a solution to the exercise Seasons of Law from CS50 Python. I'm going to show you one way you can go ahead to solve this, and my aim is just to provide you with a few hints or ideas that you could use when solving this exercise later on by yourself. So that's it. Let's look at the exercise and see what's expected from us. I'm going to scroll through all of this because this is not so important, and I'm going to start right about here. It says, in the file called Seasons.py, implement a program that prompts the user for their date of birth in the format year, month, and day with dashes in between, and then prints how old they are in minutes, rounded to the nearest integer, using English words instead of numerals, just like the sum from Rent, without any ends between words. And since a user might not know the time at which they were born, assume for simplicity that the user was born at midnight, that's 000000 on that date, and assume that the current time is also midnight. In other words, even if the user runs the program at noon, assume that it's actually midnight on the same date. And you can use datetime.date.today to get today's date per this documentation. And if this sounded a little bit confusing, pretty much what this means is that we have to assume that regardless of the time the user runs this code, let's say be it at noon, be it at 1, be it at 2, the time the user runs the code will be the exact same time the user was born. So there will be no difference in the time, say like in the minutes or the hours. The only difference will be in the number of days. And also, we are expected to structure our code like this. Import date from datetime. We'll have a main function. We can have another function of our choice. And at the end of the day, we call our function main. And we are welcome to import other built-in libraries or any other specified in the below hints and exit via sys.exit if the user does not input a date in the format year, month, and day with these dashes, and ensure that our program does not raise any exceptions. And either before or after implementing Seasons.py, additionally implement a file called test_seasons.py with one or more functions that can test our implementation of the functions besides main in Seasons.py thoroughly, each of whose name should begin with test underscore so that we can execute our test with pytest of test_seasons.py. And we've been given a few hints here. With this first hint, we are told that it is possible to subtract two date objects from one another to obtain the number of days in between them. And this is possible because the subtraction operator has been overloaded in the library datetime. And we are also encouraged to use the module inflect. This will help us to convert the minutes from an integer into actual words. And we can import this module using pip install inflect. And we've been given this link to the documentation on inflect, which we're going to see shortly. And let's look at the demo to see what the code should look like. In this case, the code is run and the user is prompted to enter input date of birth. They entered January 1st, 1999, and the code returned invalid date, which is because we've been told the user must enter a date in this format. That's year, month, and day with dashes in between. And so any other format is incorrect. So in this other case, the code was run and the user entered the correct format, 1999-0101, and we can see the output 525,600 minutes. And this output was generated considering that the actual date was January 1st, 2000. That is exactly 1 year after considering the user's date of birth. In this other case, you have 1999, December 31st, and the output was 1440 minutes. And this other case as well, you have the output as you can see here. And as usual, we are expected to create a folder, we'll call it Seasons, seed into that folder, and then create two files, Seasons.py and test_seasons.py. And at the end of our code, test our two files, Seasons.py and test_seasons.py, before submitting the exercise. And one way to test Seasons.py is to run the program and enter a date exactly 1 year before the current date, and the output should be 525,600 minutes. And this is the number of minutes in exactly 1 year, which has 365 days. So considering it's not a leap year, but if it is a leap year, this value will be a little bit different. You can run the code a second time and enter a date exactly 2 years behind the current date, and so on and so forth. And we can do the same with our test underscore seasons.py. The test for this will just be like what we've been doing before. You run our code, make sure that everything is correct, go back, modify the functions a little bit, ensure that PyTest catches those errors, use PyTest to correct those errors, ensure everything is correct before submitting our code for evaluation. So that said, before going to VS Code, there are two things I want us to see. The first is how to use inflect, and also I want us to look at the methods from datetime that are relevant to us. I've already opened these links as you can see up here, and this is a documentation for inflect. As we see, we can install inflect using the pip command, pip install inflect, and when that's done, in our Python file, we can import inflect simply by saying import inflect. And the first thing we need to do is to create an inflect engine. As we see here, we create a variable, say p equal to inflect.engine. I believe we've seen this before in a previous video, but I'm just going to run this again for us very quickly. And as we recall, inflect has a number of methods, but the method relevant to us here will be number to words. So I'm going to scroll down to see the way this numbers to word is implemented. And we can see right about here, this is one example of it. We have p the number to words 1334, and we see the output 1000,234. However, according to the exercise, our output should not contain any n. So if I scroll through again, we're going to see the solution for this right about here. So in this case, we have p.numbers to words 1234, and we'll set the parameter n word to an empty string, and this will return 1000,234. So this is the exact way we want to use inflect to solve this exercise. And in this other website, I want us to look at the methods from datetime that will be relevant to us. And the first thing I want us to see here is how to create a date object. And this can be done using the method datetime.date. All you need to pass are the parameters here, month, and day. And these arguments must be integers and follow the ranges here between a minimum here and a maximum here, month between 1 and 12, and day between 1 and the number of days in the given month and year. So datetime is going to do all the necessary checking for us. That's whether a month has 30 days, has 28 days, or has 29 days. We do not have to worry about any of that. And if there's any mistake, date is going to raise a value error, which is exactly what we needed to do for this exercise. And also, to get the current date, we can use the method .today. So we have date.today will return the current date. And I think with this, the exercise should be clear enough. So I'm going to go ahead to VS Code and we're going to start coding this exercise together. And in VS Code, this is what our file Seasons.py should look like. We have date already imported. We have a main function. At the end, we call it main. And I went ahead and added a few comments which will serve as guides. This will help us to break our code into smaller sections and so making it a little bit easier and understandable. But before we implement this file Seasons.py, I want us to look at the little Jupyter notebook I prepared to give us an idea of what we're going to do. So the first thing we need to do in this code cell is to import the necessary libraries. So we're importing date and we're importing inflect. I'm going to run this code cell. And in this other code cell, I want us to see how we can obtain the current date. And all we're doing is we're printing date.today to get the current date. And if I run this, we have 2024 August 13, which is the date of today. And in this other code cell, we're going to try to get the birthday from the user. And what we need to do is to use the input function to prompt the user to enter a date. And we're using the split method to separate that date into 3 variables, year, month, and day. And we're going to use these same variables to create a date object like we saw on the website, converting these input from stars to integers. And if I run this code cell, we've been prompted to enter a date, and I'm going to enter a date exactly 1 year from our current date. And I'll say 2023-08-13, Press enter, and we have our datetime object 2023 August 13. And in this other code cell, we're trying to obtain the number of days lived by the user. And pretty much all we need to do is to perform a simple subtraction, subtracting the current date from the user's birthday. And if I run this code cell, we have 366 days. Well, that's because this year 2024 is a leap year, and so instead of 365, we have 366. And to calculate the minutes, that's pretty easy. All we need to do is multiply the number of days by the number of hours in a day, that's 24, and multiply also by the number of minutes in an hour, which is 60. Instead of just running day underscore difference dot 24 star 60, we need to run day underscore difference dot days to access this number 366, multiply that by 24 and by 60, and if I run this code cell, we have 527,040 minutes. And in this other code cell, we can convert that integer into words, and this will be 527,040 minutes. So with this, I want to believe we have an idea of what we're going to do in our file Seasons.py. So I'm going to head back here and we're going to start writing this code together. And as we recall, we need to use the module inflect and also the module sys to solve this exercise. So I'm going to import sys, and also I'm going to import inflect. If you've not installed inflect yet, go ahead and do a pip install inflect in your terminal, and this is going to import inflect for you. I'm going to skip this main function because we're going to implement it later on. And the first thing I want to do is create a function to get the minutes lived by the user. I'm going to call this function get underscore minutes, and this function is going to take one parameter. Let's call this birthday underscore stir for birthday string. And in this function, what do I want to do? The first thing is I want to put my code in a try except else block, because we know that the user could enter something that could raise a value error. So I want to put this in a try block. If everything runs successfully, then we'll skip to the else block. If not, we want to cache a value error in the except block. And as you recall, we need to create three variables. The first variable here, the second variable month, and the third variable day without the s. And this variable is going to contain birthday stir.split, because we need to split this date into three variables, and the splitting parameter will be this single dash. And if this succeeds and we have our variables here, month and day, we want to create another variable. We'll call this variable birthday for the actual user's birthday. And this variable is going to contain a date object with parameters int of here, because remember we need to convert these to integers because they are still strs, the int of month, and lastly the int of day. And this should do to create a date object using the user's birthday. But if for any reason we have a value error from the user's input, in the except block we're going to cache this value error, and if that happens we're going to sys.exit with the message invalid date. And with this except block we should be able to cache any errors that could result from the user's input. But if there's no error and the try block runs successfully, then in an else block, we're going to calculate the date difference between the current date and the date of birth of the user. I'm going to save this in a variable. I'll call it daydiff for date difference. And this variable is going to contain date.today minus birthday. And at the end of the function, we want to return the number of minutes lived by the user, which will be daydiff for the date difference dot days to access the actual integer star 24 star 60. And this should do for our function get minutes. The next thing we want to do is to create a function to convert the ints to words. I'm going to call this function int to words underscore int to words. This function is going to take one parameter. We're going to call this integer, and inside this function what we want to do is start by creating an inflect engine. I'm just going to call this p, and I'll set this to inflect.engine. As we saw in the website online, this is all we need to do to create the engine. And I want to return p.numbers to words with the parameters integer comma, and set the end words parameter to an empty string, just as we saw in the website online. So this should do for our two functions, get minutes and into words. This will enable us to get the number of minutes lived by the user and also convert these minutes from an integer into actual words. And all we need to do now is to implement our function main. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create a variable. I'll call this birthday, and in this variable I want to get input from the user. So I'll use the input function. I'll pass a parameter to it. I'll say date of birth, birth, and I'll give some space for the user to enter their input. And the next thing is to call the functions we just implemented and print the output. So in the variable I'll call minutes, I'm going to call the function getMinutes, and in this function I'm going to pass the birthday the user just entered to us, so birthday. And then as an f string I'm going to print in curly braces or call the function into words. As you recall, we need to convert the minutes from integers into words. But I'm not just going to print this as it is. I'm going to use another string method here called capitalize, because we need to capitalize the first letter in this string. If we look back at our Jupyter notebook, when we look at this code cell here, we see that the result from running number two words of the time that we got 527,040 minutes, we have 527,040. However, the 5 here is in lowercase, but we need to convert this to uppercase. And one string method to help us do that is the method capitalize. And just beside this, we're going to add minutes. So this should do for our file Seasons.py. I'm going to save this or open up my terminal, and I'm going to test this code to see the way it works. So let me run Python of Seasons.py, and we've been prompted to enter a date of birth. I'm going to enter the same date from 1 year ago, so that will be 2023-August-13, and I press enter. We have 527,040 minutes. Let me run this one more time, and this time around I'm going to enter a wrong format. Let's say 2023/08/13. When I press enter, we have invalid date. So this tells us at least that our file Seasons.py is working correctly. So what we need to do next now is just to implement test_seasons.py. Let me go ahead and close this terminal because we're not going to use it right now. And as you'll notice, in this file I've imported a module date. Well, that's because we're going to need it in the implementation of our functions. However, as we already know, we need to import getMinute and into words from Seasons. So from Seasons, we want to import get_minutes and int_2_words. And for our file test_seasons, I'm going to propose two functions. The first function we're going to test get_minutes, and in the second function we're going to test into words. So I'm going to call this function test_get_minutes. This function will take 0 parameters, and within this function I want to assert that get_minutes of let's say our same date from last year, that will be 2023-08 for August-13, will be equal to, in parentheses, date.today, because we need to do the actual calculation like we did before, minus, we're going to create a date object with the user's input, so that will be date of 2023, 8, 13. And remember, to get the actual days as an integer, we need to use the attribute.days *24*60. Let me put a space here. So we want to assert that get_minutes of this date should be equivalent to this mathematical operation. And I'm just going to leave this function as it is, but you can go ahead and add a few more lines to the function and test maybe some other inputs and make sure that everything works correctly. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a second function, and this function I'm going to call test_into words. Let's say int_2_words without any parameters. And in this function I want to assert that int2words of, let's say, something simple. 120 is equal to the string 120. And this function too, I'm going to leave like this, but feel free to add many more lines of code to test the function into words. So well, I'm going to save this, and in our terminal, let me clear this first of all, and we're going to run pytest of test underscore seasons.py, and I press enter. We have two tests passed in 0.07 seconds. And according to this, our functions getMinute and intoWords are working just fine. So we can come back here and, for example, let's say we scroll down to probably about this point, and instead of multiplying by 60, we multiplied by 6. Let me save this and run this file again, or rather run pytest again, and we have one parsed and one field. And pytest tells us that the function or the test underscore getMinute failed. And with this error message, pytest tells us that 52,704 is not equal to 366*24*60, which we know is instead equal to 527,040. And obviously, we know the fix for this is very easy. All we need to do is come back here, introduce our 0 once more, save this file, and run pytest again, and our code is up and running again correctly. And so that's it for this exercise, Seasons of Love. I want to believe the code was clear enough in the video. However, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be more than pleased to answer you. So feel free to go ahead and try this code out, implement it your own way and modify the code as you please, test it and ensure that everything works correctly before submitting the exercise. Remember that there are a number of ways that you could go about solving this exercise. Looking at this function getMinute, instead of using the split method here to separate the user's input before creating a date object, there's actually a datetime method that can help you do this in just one line of code. That said, if you did enjoy the video, do well to hit the like and subscribe button so as to support the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in my upcoming videos. Have a good day.